Hello, and welcome to the Six Figure Developer Podcast, the podcast where we talk about new and exciting technologies, professional development, clean code, career advancement, and more. I am John Calloway.
I'm Clayton Hunt.
And I'm John Ash.
With us this week is Dylan Israel. Dylan teaches and mentors tens of thousands of students on YouTube, Udemy, and other platforms each month. He likes to volunteer to talk to kids about STEM through code.org. In his free time, he runs a YouTube channel and works on bettering his skill set as a developer. Welcome, Dylan.
Thanks. That was a nice intro. I like that.
So before we get started, would you just give us a little bit of an introduction of yourself? Maybe sort of how did you get started in this industry?
Yeah, so I think I got started in a very similar way to a lot of people who want to get started in software engineering. And it's like, oh, I'm just going to go to college and get a computer science degree. And, in my case, that didn't work out. And I sort of went the self-taught route after seeing like what college had to offer. Like not right away. I was a very slow learner. It took me about 5 to 6 years to move on from that. But when I decided on computer science, what really did it for me wasn't a love for software. That came much later. It was more of a, let's check off these 3 stats. What has a lot of jobs, what pays well, and what's going to continue to grow. And that's how I ended up in sort of software.
Okay. So what are you doing these days?
Nowadays, I'm doing full stack mean. And so I'm building internal sort of applications for the firm that I work with.
Okay. Yeah. So do you want to sort of elaborate a little bit more on sort of the process that you actually went through and going from sort of, becoming that self-taught developer?
Yeah, so that's like a journey within itself. So when I decided that I was going to drop out of college, which wasn't ever, it's never an easy choice when you're like 24, you really don't have anything going on for you except this dream of getting a CS degree and getting started in industry, and your parents have been paying for it. So they're like, no one's happy except you, maybe. And so I made a plan. I said, look, I'm going to get an internship. And the way that I got it, crazy enough, I was applying. And finally I saw there's a resume section on Craigslist. And I got a $12 hour internship that was 2 hours away. And I was getting there at like 6 a.m. in the morning. I ended up getting that role finally and did that for like 3 months. And after that, I had no idea what I was doing, but I was glad to have the resume experience. But after that, I took a role with a student information system company, very similar to like Blackboard or Moodle. And it wasn't a software role. It was, this was when I was still in California. I was doing like technical documentation. It was sort of a technical documentation / business analyst role where I was going there. And coincidentally, the thing that got me that role was, this was about maybe 3 months before I started my YouTube channel. I had like 200 subscribers, but I had like 300 videos just going through things like Codecademy, working through it and sort of explaining my thought process. And when I interviewed, I told them like, hey, I want to be a dev, but I'll take this role because like it's at a software company. I'm going to learn a ton and go from there. So that was how I got my initial start. And then when they didn't make me a dev, I just left for a dev role. And like that process was, I'm summarizing it quite dramatically, but that process wasn't easy. You're studying every day, every single day. So I'm doing anything I can get my hands on to, going to meetups. I'm probably doing 3 to 4 hours a day, about an hour in the morning, about 3 hours Monday through Friday. And on the weekends, just like a stupid amount of studying, something like 14 hours where you wake up at like 6, you get done at like 10. And I'm dreaming about it. There was multiple times when I was going to that job where I was thinking of like, basic algorithm things I still couldn't solve at that point, like reversing strings and just silly things. And then I'd be driving to work, stuck in that LA traffic, and I'd pass it by about 10 miles as my brain's just sort of tinkering on it, and I'd figure it out. And then, second I get home, I go and solve it.
Very cool. Very cool. So you said that you let the technical documentation role go because they didn't make it a dev, but you took another dev opportunity. How did you find and sort of land that one?
Yeah, so one thing like a lot of people struggle with is, am I ready to be a dev? And like that's one of the common questions I get on my YouTube channel. Like, how do I know? And oftentimes I just tell people, go out there and see what people are asking for and hiring for, and just go and interview. and test yourself out. I was sort of in this unique position where I could see people come in, and we had one of those, the entire room was whiteboards and a glass wall, and you'd see these people fail things, and I'd be like, yo, I know that shit. And and it just gave me this confidence. And that was when I talked to my boss, said, hey, when I took this role, I told you it was going to be short term and I wanted to move into dev or Q. I would take in anything. And nothing happened for about 6 weeks. So what I did was I started applying online for roles. And in LA, for the first 2 weeks, I wasn't getting any callbacks. And what I ended up discovering was that I think it's Indeed that shows you how many people apply for the jobs. I was going against 500 candidates. And I was like, I can't beat out 500 people. I have no resume experience. I'm just learning, getting going. And I'd been wanting to get out of LA for a while. And so I started applying to various lower cost of living cities, Tampa area being one of them, where I ended up. And I started seeing that if I applied on that day, I was getting callbacks. And I was going against 7 applicants. And so once I started changing sort of my application process, that was when I was starting to get those interviews. And I started discovering what gaps I had in my knowledge and what I needed to study. And I ended up getting a role relatively quickly. From that point on, I think in 4 weeks, I was packed up my stuff and I'm driving my little 3-cylinder Mitsubishi across country with my last $500 and renting a room with a bunch of college students that are just doing crazy nonsense. And I'm just trying to make sure I keep my job because I can't go home after all this. I worked very hard, and it's probably a 9-month period where I was just coding every day for hours upon hours and finally landed my first role.
So that's kind of backwards to what I would have thought. I would have thought starting in California would have actually helped you. But you're saying it almost hurt because there was so many people in your field looking for jobs that you just couldn't find a job.
Yeah, I mean, how hard is it for junior developers nowadays to get jobs? Because most companies, they don't want to train you, they don't want to do anything. And I definitely was at a state where I would require some attention, even though I could do the task. But I'm going against people that are, recent college graduates. Boot camps are very plentiful in, Southern California. And I'm also going against hundreds of applicants where the roles that were calling me back, they were roles that, I remember one interview where the guy I was interviewing, by the way, I'm desperate at this point to get out of this role and start deving. I remember he's like, real devs use Dreamweaver or something like that. And I was like, and it is if you've ever seen the Trailer Park Boys, he really reminds me of one of those guys. He had a Bluetooth ear thing. He's eating a salad on top of a TV tray as he interviewed me. It was just the most disrespectful interview I've ever had. And, but yeah, I remember going through these struggles. That was the one company that wanted to hire me, and I just sort of couldn't do it. But yeah, it was definitely more of a challenge locally than it was expanding out.
Yeah, so many companies these days really focus on hiring senior developers, developers with X number of years of experience and all of the technologies with which they do their job, right? You must have experience in 10 different technologies and so many number of years. So it's really hard to break into this industry sometimes, especially if you're being crowded out by the number of applicants.
Yeah, not only that, there was definitely a learning process on how to do my resume and what was important. I found myself, after I started getting some callbacks, hearing what I was lacking, and it was be like, you don't have any Jira experience. And I was just like, simple things where now I had to, put these sort of silly keywords on here just to get those check marks. And I was using Git and SVN, and so I just put generic version control on there. And that was something that apparently was just disqualifying me from pretty much every interview. And then I started getting this feedback, and then you add these things on just for these, HR people to give me the check mark and pass me forward.
So you said a few minutes ago that you were doing a lot of extra programming, 4 hours a day or something. Mm-hmm. Was this all just code katas online, or were you working on side projects?
Yeah, so a little bit of both. So as crazy as it sounds, I don't advise anyone to do this. I was, I'm so broke. Depending on the point in time, my girlfriend and I are sleeping on the floor in a living room. My mother's bringing me groceries. This is the type of, living on $45,000 in LA in downtown Los Angeles. You're basically renting a crack shack. And I remember her bringing me groceries, and I'm just grinding and grinding and grinding, and it's all free resources. So like things like YouTube, Codecademy, free Code Camp, any free courses on Udemy, anything that was free, I could get my hands on. I didn't spend $1 once I dropped out of college and learning. And I don't know that's the best plan. I also did sites like Code Fights, now this Code Signals, all those sort of Code Codas thing. That was something that really helped me sort of level up. I just made a list of what I needed to learn, and based off of the job apps, and I started going through it piece by piece. And then, of course, I'm one of the things that sort of my idea when I started my YouTube channel, because I had a buddy who's, he does YouTube full time now. He makes, 6 figures doing it. And he's like, I remember years ago, he was like, I'm making $300 a month. And it's like, I'm making $1,000 a month. And it's at some number. I was like, I'm just going to make a video portfolio and like make some money. Cool. But at least it's a unique project. So all these things I'm doing, I'm working through them piece by piece by piece. And like, there's no quality to them. I'm like, you can see me struggling through it. Usually what I would do is I go through it and then I would narrate myself working through it so that I could actually make it stick. And that's one of the things I think that really made it stick for me as I was going through all these things. And I wasn't even focused so much on learning a language or like a stack in the beginning. I was just like, I'm going to do Ruby, PHP, JavaScript, anything I could get my hands on that was free, understand the fundamentals. And then at some point, when I discovered freecodecamp.org and that I started building my first projects, that was when I was like, I absolutely fell in love with it and just was like, this is for me.
So what made you land on the mean stack? If you weren't initially choosing a stack to learn and grow with, is that just the technology or technology suite that chose you, or just the role that you landed in most recently?
Yeah, so my very first role was sort of a JavaScript and PHP role, and I found out very quickly that I hated PHP, and so and people are very upset when I say that on my YouTube channel. It's like one of my number one videos is me just shitting on PHP versus JavaScript, and people are very upset. But I found out that I didn't like that, and I ended up taking a role where I was a junior to Clayton, who was my tech lead at the time. And part of the reason I went there was not even technologies. I just thought I'd become a better developer. And so naturally, as I'm working through Free Code Camp, which is a full stack online open source JavaScript boot camp, essentially, that you can work through at your own pace and build projects. And that's sort of how I ended up going through there. And every job since then has been JavaScript centric. And I've worked in Vue, I've worked in a few React projects, and I've just naturally have tended to fall in love with TypeScript specifically, and Angular tends to go hand in hand with that. And as you work for these enterprise corporations, that's what they tend to like.
Okay, and you mentioned a little bit that you had a friend who was doing the YouTube thing. You said, hey, there might be some opportunity here. Yeah, would you talk a little bit about what that's been like going through that, and sort of how you've enjoyed it, maybe some challenging moments along that way?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's been probably one of the secrets to sort of my success with roles, because it's, we always hear this cliche personal branding thing, and like, I don't really think about it like that. I more so think about, you get to actually see me in action, and you get to see what I'm doing. And there's so many people that I've interviewed that say, I code. Yeah, okay, do you have anything to show me? And they go, no. And so then you're like, okay, but here you have, I think nowadays I have like 900 videos of just whatever, talking about things, building things. But originally it was like, I'm gonna have a unique side project. Like I know I'm self-taught, and I know that I'm going against people with CS degrees or boot camp certs, and like I have to have something to make up for that. I can't just go in there unprepared. And so I started tackling that with YouTube and becoming well versed. And it's like, all right, it's a cool side project, video portfolio. Maybe I make some money. And there's always challenges when you put yourself out there. When you put yourself out there, there's plenty of people who, maybe they are unhappy in their life, or whatever it is, that just want to sort of shit on you, for lack of a better word. I'll give you a perfect example. When I'm having my mom bring me groceries, I'm going to meetups, and I got invited to this friend. I'm pair programming on whiteboards with my friend Christine, and she's like, hey, come down. We're doing a meetup. We're all going to work on some JavaScript projects. There's a senior dev there. And I introduced myself. Within 15 seconds, he sort of, because apparently they're saying, oh, he's coming down there. And there's a subscriber that wanted to meet me, which was strange because I had like 500 subscribers. But he's doing the same thing. He's grinding. And the guy looks me up on LinkedIn and says something along the lines of, I didn't know a pizza delivery driver could do coding tutorials. And, I have this thing where like stuff like that doesn't really bother me too much, but I do remember it because I'm a very big believer in negative role models. And what I mean by that is like it's very easy to run towards like riches and fame and see like, and you're okay falling short. But if there's something that you're like you don't want to become and you want to run away from, it's a much larger motivator, which is like why some people have to sort of hit rock bottom and then they're like, yo, never again. And that's been something that for me mentally has been a very good visual.
So being self-taught, excuse me. So being self-taught and describing yourself as being self-taught, how do you learn or distinguish best practices while you're going through your training and researching and learning new technologies, new skills?
Yeah, I would say early on in your career, it's about learning technologies, like just actually learning them. Because you're going to go into a workplace and you're like, oh, I only know like half this stuff. And there's going to be things like I remember going to my very first job, like I had no idea what testing was. I wasn't super familiar with backend at all. And then I never touched PHP and I had no idea what Agile was and, Scrum or Kanban or any of that stuff. So you're going to get exposed to quite a bit and getting up and running on those things. And the best thing you can do is just to actually try. Like it's that simple. You go and you look for people who know this stuff better than you. And if you're lucky to be surrounded by people, you ask questions. Like I think so many people are afraid to ask for help and this goes for like, I've worked with a lot of like contractors who are like so afraid to say that they're stuck on something that you end up laying them off because they don't do anything for 3 months. And it's like that, you have to be willing to say, hey, I don't know. And just being asked for direction. Like one thing I do every week on my channel is a 1 hour sort of live stream to ask questions to provide direction because no one's going to do the work for you, but they can tell you go this way instead of going this way. And this is what you'll learn. And then of course, those people will tell you about what's the correct resources to read and how to get better. But I think one thing that I've always done is set a plan for the year. So always try to have a way of growing instead of just assuming these things are going to happen. And sometimes you have to leave roles to do that and experience new things where, maybe you're at a smaller team and they don't really care about certain things. And you're like, okay, let me jump to another team that does and grow that way as well.
Now that plan, that's really interesting. Is that something you've done sort of personally, or is that like, how did you pick that practice up?
Yeah, so my goal has always been to make a lot of money, and so it's one of those things where I look at what I can make. How can I learn, and how can I make money learning? And so that's where like a lot of my side projects come from. And I'll even do like a video announcing, hey, this is how I'm going to progress my career. Year 1, it was technologies. I need to learn these things. Year 2 is about sort of leveling up my code with clean code practices. And then there's like year 3, it was something along the lines of, build a course, start doing these other things. And I start to try and align those things and like kill like 12 birds with one stone sort of thing. But making a conscious decision about what it is I'm going to study. Maybe it's technologies, what it is I'm going to progress my career in. Maybe I want to get some certs on my record, maybe, and see what a lot of companies are asking for. Like one thing I recommend a lot of people do is go and get like an Agile cert. You study for a month and then you can go and get a certification for $100 and put that on your resume. That will be something that will not only impress the developers, but also impress sort of HR. And every year I sort of, like this year I wanted to go to some conferences. I did. I want to actually speak at one. So I'm reaching out to several people to speak at conferences and meetups and sort of put myself out in different directions. I think variety is a huge thing because different platforms and mediums and directions can give you a different outlook on how you can get better for the following year.
Yeah, it sounds like you've really kind of taken hold of your career and you're really driving, you're the driving force behind that. So you're not just accepting what is, you're looking to what can be. And since dropping out of college and teaching and learning and growing, it sounds like you've really progressed quite a bit.
Yeah, you have to be very aggressive. And like I was talking with a colleague of mine, and he's like, aren't you sort of scared that your salary is going to go down because you've sort of, in 2 years you've doubled your salary? And I was like, no, not really, because like I think of it this way: is that like say you were making 80 and then you're making 80 for what 8 years, and then you're like, okay, cool, well I'll go from 80 to 100 and then to 110, and if I drop back down to 80 next year, I made an extra 40 grand. Like what do I care about increasing my salary? And in theory, if you're, no one should just give you a high paying salary. You should have earned that, and like that's one of the things that sort of angers me when I interview candidates for roles that alongside me that are going to pay very well and you're going to have great benefits. Is you have these people show up and you're like, who employed you? Honest to God, like who gave you this job? And it drives me insane, absolutely insane, because you shouldn't. The average family makes $55,000, and you're, a low end junior role is probably going to pay you $50,000 or $60,000, and then you have people show up for 6-figure jobs that have absolutely no business writing code. Period.
Can't say that I haven't been in that experience before.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
Yeah. So in that situation, when you're involved in the interview process, what are the types of questions or what gives you that impression, or how can you get that impression out of a developer that they're eager, they're driven, they're motivated, they have knowledge, they have experience? What are the types of things that you're looking for?
Yeah, for me particularly, it's not any sort of gotchas. Like sometimes I like to ask a variety of like technical phone screen questions, like forget the whiteboard problems and stuff like that. You give me like a complex whiteboard problem, I might mess it up, do a spiral here and find this value, right? But if you can't do sort of fundamental stuff like a FizzBuzz problem, like we have a problem, we have a major problem. And if you say you've been doing JavaScript for 10 years and I ask you what a double equals versus triple equals is, and you can't get that right, or sort of these basic things about JavaScript, because JavaScript's a very unique language at times where you should know some of these items that aren't anything that's sort of out there. One thing I look for when interviewing sort of junior developers is just what they're doing. The common question I like to ask people is, tell me 5 things you've learned in the last year. And if they can't name one, usually people can't name 5, but if they can't name one, we have a problem. And tell me something you're working on. Tell me, what you're most proud of. And like, it's very easy, very quickly to see who doesn't know what they're talking about. And, because you're only asking questions that you know the answers to. And so, when people lie to me, you're gone. Like, I don't care if you bomb the interview, but if you just, it's one thing to say, I'm not really sure, but this is what I think it is. But it's another thing to very confidently answer with just a bold-faced lie about what something is. But you remain professional. You try to educate people. Like I always try to, because you can see I'm very passionate about this. So sometimes that may come off as angry, and that's not really the intent. So you have to, in the moment you handle it very professionally, but I try to educate people about what they should know, because I don't think I ever ask anything that's super out there.
Yeah, that's actually a very similar technique. So I really like your question, like name 5 things that you learned this last year. I think I'll probably end up using that. But one of the things that I do is I often will, when we come across those moments where someone's like, oh, I'm not really sure, I'm a junior developer or whatever, and I'm interviewing them, and I ask them, can you explain this other thing? I'll then go ahead and explain it in the interview. I won't do this for all of the interview questions, but for that one thing, and I want to see how well do they actually respond to that. Do they respond in like being able to hear me out as I sort of explain that concept to them, and see if they like pick that up and go run with it and understand it, or are they just sort of like, yeah, whatever.
Yeah, it's very telling too, where you have people who just shut down, and you're like, well, let me work you through it, and like, no, I have no idea. You're like, well, you're not going to try? Because to me, it's like, if you don't even try, that's our whole job. I don't have anything memorized. I have some principles and fundamentals, but like the whole point is trying and then succeeding. And like, sometimes you need help to get there, and that's fine. But like, you just give up. All right, well, I mean, you're cut as far as I'm concerned.
Well, Dylan, we always have at the end of the episode a spot for people to give their advice to people who are just getting started. And I think this question is perfect for you. So, what would you say what kind of words of wisdom could you give to someone who's got their heart set on and their goal and their vision is to become a software developer, to break into the industry? Maybe they're a college student, maybe they're trying to do this on their own. What would you say to them?
Yeah, so consistency is the utmost key to being successful, especially very early on. So people who are, people make all sorts of excuses why they can't code every day, and all sorts of excuses why they can't go to the gym, and all, whatever it is that's hard that I want a six pack, I don't have one, and I can make excuses about that. But everyone can make excuses. So find the way to be consistent. Find a way to put in 2 to 4 hours a day, every single day, until you have a job. Like I've talked with students who have been, I do some side mentoring, and the people who come to me and are like, give me excuses, those are the people who never end up with jobs. And the people who, I had a guy who's like, I broke my arm, but you said code every day, and I was coding with my left hand. That guy has a job, and you'll get there because every day you're taking a step forward. And working smart and working hard have to go hand in hand. So if you're not sure what to study, the easiest thing to do is find out what people are hiring for in the areas you're looking for, and do those sort of basic fundamental things, and go and test yourself and challenge yourself, and don't wait until you think you're going to be ready or the perfect project. One of the things people get so caught up on starting side projects, which are sort of a fun way to learn, is about launching the perfect thing and waiting until it's so right. Just get out there, throw some crap out there, and you can make it better down the road and see what it's about, and grow and have fun with it. Keep it fun. The only way that you can consistently do these things, because I remember crying at my keyboard not being able to solve algorithms time and time again, throwing things at my whiteboard because I didn't understand what an API was. And you have to figure out, don't take the day off, change what you're doing. Instead of doing algorithms, go build a project. Sick of doing projects, go watch a video on whatever topics it is. Sick of doing that, do a course. Sick of doing that, go to a meetup. There's so many different ways that you can grow as a developer and spend that time, that if you just make sure that every single day you're moving forward, you're going to not only level up, you're going to level up so much faster than the average dev in the industry.
Excellent. And are there any resources that you might be able to point people at?
Yeah,
You've mentioned a number of them.
Yeah, so YouTube is, free resources. If you're looking to go into software, chances are you're sick of being broke, or you're sick of whatever your job. YouTube is a great resource. Pretty much anything you want to talk about, you can go and get a free course on. Udemy, you can get courses for $10 dedicated to certain subjects. You can go on sites like one site I've done some courses for is Scrimba. Scrimba is a very cool interactive platform where you can pause the video, and it's a screen share and has audio, and you can actually start editing the code right then and there. You can go to meetup.com, look for various meetups, and sign up in your area. You can volunteer through code.org and give talks. And I think a very big part of being a developer is not only giving back to the community, but mentoring, and you can do that very early on in your career. So there's a lot of great resources out there for you to get up and going. A lot of them cost nothing to very low end.
Awesome. And then for people trying to follow you and kind of what social media sort of plugs can you give? Yeah,
so I have my YouTube channel. This is probably my main platform right now, which is youtube.com/codingtutorials360. It's a funny little side note. My father, who I've had my YouTube channel for 4 years, has never watched a video. And last week, he finally texted me. I said, "Google me, bitch." But yeah, which is true. It shows up if you Google my first and last name, Dylan Israel. So that will show up. But yeah, you'll find everything on there, and a couple other side projects will all be linked in the description and all that sort of stuff.
Cool. How about? Well, you mentioned you're trying to get into some conferences, but do you have any other speaking engagements kind of upcoming?
Not yet, no. So I've been trying to teach at some meetups, and I've reached out to some colleagues that do some, and it always falls through. So I don't know if I'm just going to start my own or what. Right now, I'm very busy on building some talks and lectures to sort of skill up my various team members. So that's almost a little bit of mentoring. I've reached out to DevFest Florida, which I went to earlier this year, and they're going to be getting back to me about potentially a speaking opportunity towards the end of the year. They said thinking about it. But yeah, there's a couple like course sites that I'm working out, building some sort of contract work with them, which is kind of exciting. But if anybody has anything, I am very open. Like I that is one of my goals this year, to go to conferences, to speak at meetups and conferences. So you can shoot me an email at Dylan's email 310@gmail.com. Hashtag shameless plug. But
All right. Thanks, Dylan. Really appreciate you coming on the show.
thank you. I appreciate it, guys.
That was Dylan Israel. Dylan teaches and mentors tens of thousands of students on YouTube, Udemy, and other platforms each month. He likes to volunteer to talk to kids about STEM through code.org. In his free time, he runs a YouTube channel and works on bettering his skill set as a developer.
If you like this episode, please like, rate, and review on iTunes.
Find show notes, blog posts, and more at sixfiguredev.com.
And be sure to follow us on Twitter at sixfiguredev.
This has been another episode of the Six Figure Developer Podcast, helping others reach their potential. I am John Calloway.
I'm Clayton Hunt.
And I am John Ash.